Okay, let's continue. So yesterday we were talking about the two goats, and let me just repeat again. A lot of the ideas, these are concepts that the commentaries, suggest as symbolisms, and the ideas don't always work in consonance with each other. Each one's an independent idea to the degree that it applies. So one of the commentaries points out, like Rav Hirsch, Rav Shimshon Hirsch, if you've heard of him. Remember yesterday, those of you were all here yesterday. We're talking about the two goats on Yom Kippur. So Rav Hirsch takes it into a completely different realm, what these two goats represent. First of all, the idea of drawing lots, doesn't it strike you as a bit strange? We're drawing lots on Yom Kippur to determine which goat is which. We're drawing lots. I mean, lots runs contrary to Judaism. Haman drew lots to determine what day is auspicious for killing the Jews.
Yeah, but we draw lots in our own way, Yom Kippur.
What's that? That's what we're asking about. Why would we be drawing lots?
We're drawing because we're saying who shall live and who shall die. We'll put my life in someone else's hands.
It's the daylight lots.
That's what's that?
So it's the daylight lots.
Right. In other words, the drawing of the lots is that we're in the balance, so to speak. And it could go either way, but it could go either way depending on your choice. You have the right to choose. You could choose, but we realize that you have two goats that look exactly the same, and one could end up a sacrifice, and one could end up in Azazel, and you draw lots. The lots representing that our lot is, so to speak, because we don't believe in lots as far as drawing lots itself. Haman believed lots represents chance. There's a chance. That's one of the reasons why the whole concept of superstition and lots and chance and fate and luck runs contrary to Judaism, because we believe that things are preordained, not that it's left to chance. That's why Haman represents the concept of it's all chance. It's all chance, because the best way to undermine any sort of responsibility to God is by saying, well, it's all chance anyway. It's all chance anyway. And that's why that undermines Judaism. Here we draw lots on these two goats to show you, it's all in the balance right now. It could go either way. Obviously, we have to taper that with the fact that we have the choice to make it go either way. And I told the guys this morning, it's very important to remember that Yom Kippur, part of Yom Kippur being an atonement is the belief that Yom Kippur atones. Yom Kippur, you have to believe Yom Kippur atones. So you have to do tshuva, we have to try to commit ourselves to being better and so on and so forth. But you have to believe the day itself, just fasting on Yom Kippur, affects atonement for us. That's the idea. So the idea of drawing the lot, the idea of the two goats, Rav Hirsch says is like this. One goat says La Hashem. La Hashem means he's dedicated to Hashem. He's going to go into the Beis HaMikdash, and he's going to be sacrificed in the Beis HaMikdash, the ultimate offering, an offering to God. The other goat is going out to Azazel. He's going out into the wilderness and he's free. So Rav Hirsch says, let's get into the mind of these two goats.
Well, I wouldn't hear yesterday, so what are these two goats for?
One is sacrificed and one is pushed off the cliff in the wilderness. So Rav Hirsch says like this, let's try to get into the mind of the two goats. Okay, what are the goats thinking? If you were a goat, what are you thinking? So, your friend just got La Hashem put on him. The frummy, he's going to live his life for God, into the Beis HaMikdash, another shul, where they're going to, he's going to be a life of sacrifice, and he's going to be in a shul somewhere, saying Tehillim and learning that, that's what Rav Hirsch says. And me, I'm the goat, I'm out, I'm living free. I'm out in the wilderness, and this is great. This is it's a goat's life, and you're out there in the wilderness, and you're climbing around, and I'm getting even higher, and I'm at a higher position, and up on a cliff, and I'm looking out and next thing you know, I'm off the cliff. So Rav Hirsch says that is a perception, and again, Rav Hirsch was writing, if you know anything about the history of Rav Hirsch had taken on the world of reform and enlightenment who were rebelling against Judaism. Rav Hirsch had taken them on and was trying to show what Judaism is and what Judaism isn't. So the perception outside of Judaism is, the frummy goes in and he lives a life of sacrifice, and I get to live the life of Riley out in the wilderness, and I live great, I live wonderful, live terrific.
But then you can.
And one day, off the cliff you go, right? And if it's not in this world, it'll be in the world to come. And so he says the two goats represent the choices that a human being could make. That's what we're being shown on Yom Kippur. You could choose to live a life, La Hashem, a life of what is perceived as sacrifice, which is the biggest, and I repeat this over and over because it's probably the single most important point that anybody could know about Judaism. The biggest misconception that we have, that people have about Judaism is that you're a religious Jew, and a religious dedicated Jew is trading in this world for the world to come. You will have nothing in this world, and you'll have the world to come. And that the guy who makes the opposite trade, he enjoys the pleasures of this world, and then the world to come, he's willing to sacrifice. And that's a misconception. It's a misconception because the Jew who lives with self-control enjoys this world, he enjoys the physical world, and he has the world to come. And a person who's out of control doesn't enjoy not this world, not the world to come. A person who's out of control may have pleasure. Never confuse pleasure with happiness. He may be indulging his pleasures, but the Medrash compares him to somebody who's thirsty and he drinks salt water. And all that happens is you get thirsty and thirstier. And eventually you're burnt out. And that's why you see people who have lived that way. And at a certain point, they just look like they've died, but their souls haven't left them. The bottom line is that a person who lives out of control, so then he suffers the consequences. And it seems like you're having fun until you plunge off a cliff. A person who lives a Torah life lives a life of self-control, and then there's a payoff down the line, because down the line, a person gets married, he has a family. So obviously, the way somebody once put it is, this whole concept, let's face it, for a single male to become a Baal Tshuva. So what are the challenges? Shabbos, what's the challenge of Shabbos? You have good food, and you get to eat and sleep for 24 hours, which is what we would do. We would pay to do that. That's why you get to do it for free. So Shabbos is not a problem. So what? So you can't use your phone, you can't drive your car. So you stay home and eat. And if you really have to leave the TV on from before Shabbos, just don't turn channels, if you're really desperate, okay? Shabbos is not an issue. It's not even an issue at work, because if you're in the United States, you could get some sort of, there's legal protection for your holiday, and the best thing that could happen for you is that you suffer because of Shabbos. Then you could sue the boss and take over the company. If the guy fires you, gives you a hard time for Shabbos or Yarmulke or whatever it is, that's the best thing that could happen to you. Because then you get to file lawsuits and become rich. So then you never have to work. So so Shabbos is not a problem. Kashrus. What's the big deal with kashrus? Kashrus, there are over 50,000 products in the United States that have kashrus supervision. Over 50,000 products in the United States that have kashrus supervision, and some of them are actually kosher. So you see, the way food is not a problem. Everywhere you go in the world, there's food. You get kosher food. So what is the problem? There's only one problem. It's the problem of the opposite gender. That's the problem. So for a single male, it's a challenge. Now, I want to point out something very important. A person who lives a life of lack of control before he gets married, he's out of control, and that's obviously the way most of the world lives. So what happens is when he gets married, he views his wife as a warden, because now he gets married, and his wife has just put him in prison, because up until he was married, he was free. And the world was at his beck and call, and now all of a sudden, boom, limitation because of her. The guy who lives his life with control before he's married, he doesn't see his wife as a warden, he sees his wife as a liberator. That's a completely different view of your wife. It's a completely different approach to marriage. And so a person lives with a certain amount, and even if a person was not lived without that control, it's never too late to regain the control before getting married. So a person lives with control now, and then will view his wife as a liberator. A person who lives with control, he has a wife, he has a family, and I don't know how long you plan on living, but most people would like to live as long as possible. And most people would like to live to 50, maybe to 70, maybe to 90. People plan on living for a while. Well, when you're 70, life isn't what it was when you're 23. So people think, well, when I'll work and I'll retire, and then we'll live. Yeah, well, I got news for you. By the time you get to 70, all those grand plans you had of working and living and retiring, harpooning off the coast of Nova Scotia is just not what you want to do at 70. 23, that looked very tempting. Let's go harpooning, all those action verbs with and an ing, which looked tempting when you were 20 and 30. At 70, there's no more action verbs. At 70, it's denturing. Right, at 70, it's visiting, doctoring. Right, that's what you're doing. So, do you plan on living there? So then, when you're 70 years old and you got married and you lived and you have a family and you have grandchildren, so you have something to show for your life. A person who says, nah, I don't want to live, I don't want to get married, I don't want to, I want to have fun, then all of a sudden they hit 60, 70 years old, all of a sudden they end up empty. They're empty, there's nothing there. And he has sense, every human being senses they want to leave something behind in this world. They have nothing to leave behind. So a guy once in the big financial crash, a guy lost his money. I lost a tremendous amount of money. So he went lamenting to his rabbi. He said to his rabbi, all I have to show for my last 25 years is my 1 hour a day of daf yomi. That's all I have to show for it. Everything else is washed away. I lost all my money. What have you done for 25 years? You got not only you got no future, you got no past. So if a person understands, you have to live with it, it's going to happen, and it's inevitable. And a person gets to that point, and then they live with the regret, and therefore their entire, they say, who laughs last, what's it, who laughs best, right? You want to end on a good note. You don't want to go out on a bad note. You want to end on a good note. Because then everything up until that point was, as long as it has a good ending, the happy ending at the end of all the novels. You want to have the happy ending. It doesn't matter how much, and if you go out on a bad note, then you realize you had no world no life in this world, and you have very little to look for in the world to come. That's what the two goats represent. That's what Hirsch says. Those two goats represent the choices a person can make. It's a challenge. It's not easy. Don't let anybody ever tells you that it's easy to be a religious Jew is misrepresenting Judaism. There are certainly challenges. You could be stuck you could be stuck somewhere on Shabbos, where you could be at an airport where you're stuck in the airport for a day eating apples and crackers because you can't drive. That's not always easy. They're challenges. The lights could blow out on Shabbos at home, and you have to sit in the house without an air conditioning. And that's not always easy. And it's a misrepresentation, an immature misrepresentation of Judaism to tell you that it's always easy, because it's not. And it's also a misrepresentation of Judaism to tell you that be frum and everything will be good. It's also a irresponsible misrepresentation, because there are plenty of frum people. Not everything is good. They can struggle financially. They have health issues. They may have issues with their children. Not everything is good. But you certainly increase your chances. The things which are most important to you, you certainly increase your chances when you make a commitment to Torah life. Now, I want to do a little experiment with you. I want you to think for a second. Imagine it is your moment of grace. And you could ask right now for any three things that you want that will provide you with a happy, content, fulfilling life. Okay, you can have any three things you want right now. There's only one catch. It's not a fantasy. That means whatever you ask for goes with the very real positive and negative consequences. So, for example, if you want to be the CEO of a corporation, you're a CEO with the aggravation and with the potential ulcers that go with being. It can't be, I want to be CEO, but with everything going well. That's fantasy. You could have a motorcycle if you want. One guy once told me that's what he wants in life, the big, Harley, that 10,000 or whatever they have over there, whatever, 50,000, 90,000, 1,000, whatever, he wants a Harley. But I want a motorcycle with no chance of racking up. Sorry, that's fantasy. That's fantasy. You could have any three things that you want right now that will provide you with a happy, content, fulfilling life, but they go with the real consequences. I want you to think about that now first. I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. What three things would you choose right now? And they should be concrete things, not spirituality. I want to know the concrete things to bring you to the joy in life. Give you 30 seconds. Okay. How many of you have on your list a lot of money? I like honesty, Gil. Okay. How many of you have on your list a lot of honor? It's my game. I get as many as I want. Okay. How many of you have a lot of power? Interesting. Power, control. Some people like control. Some people like they're different prime ministers that Israel's had. Some are much more into sense. They like the honor, the center of attention. There are others who don't want the attention. They just like the idea of controlling. It's a completely different. What do you call it? Okay. How many of you have good health? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Could I add that? Yeah, you could change. If you forgot about it, you could change. Yeah. How many of you have good health somewhere on your list of three? Life ain't much if you don't have good health, right? So good health, I would say good health is generally on there. Usher, not?
Third one.
That's the third one. Okay, good health is on there. Gil, you had it on there?
No, because I was thinking more of, I didn't know.
Okay, so you could change that. Now that I suggest good health, now you could put that on your list. Is there anybody who doesn't want good health? I'd like to speak to you afterwards because you need some help, right? Okay, so we'll put good health on the list. Anybody? Okay.
We don't need to.
Okay, good. Okay, you got good health. Okay, how many of you have a good marriage/family relationships? Look at that. How surprising. Okay. Now that we have, everybody has 1 and 2 on their list. Somewhere on your list you have health and you have family. Okay. Now I'm just curious. What are the third things? Anything got it? What's your third one? I would like, for me, it's the Cubs to win the World Series. But okay, but that's it. Oh, I said no fantasies. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? What have you got? I'm curious. Yeah. Right. Any a job? Okay. Parnassa. Okay. Or decent parnassa. Okay. Interesting. All right. Now, let me ask you a question. Where, if you look at the Torah, the Torah certainly promotes health. Nobody asked me, why do so many from people smoke? Okay, that should be the worst thing. But from people who also do not engage in bungee jumping and in alligator wrestling and in other ing verbs, mountain climbing and Everest by themselves, that sort of thing. You do get the rare individual, but in general, there is a prohibition in the Torah. A Torah Jew is told, you have to take care, you're not allowed to do anything that can terminate your life immediately. You're not allowed to engage in anything that is objectively dangerous because you have an obligation to guard your life. Okay, Torah Jews do the best they can and in general are not involved in dangerous motor sports. Right? In Bnei Brak, you're not going to find a whole lot of downhill skiers, what do you call it, Indy 500 racers or anything else involved in motorsports. Okay. When you take a look around you, where do you see family? I mean, let's look at just statistics. And you could argue all you want, but the statistics are that in the world at large, the divorce rate is about 50%, maybe more. In the From Torah world, it has skyrocketed up to 5%. So people argue, well, yeah, but they're really not happy and their divorce is frowned upon. I'm sure that there are couples who would like to get divorced in the From world and they don't because it's frowned upon. But they explain away a 45% difference. 45% of the people are miserable and they really would like to get divorced. They just don't because it's frowned upon. Okay, you have to bring some backing, number one. Number two, in your own experiences, you guys have been away in various homes for Shabbos. You've been in Shabbos meals. Did you sense that was a family that was ready to break apart? That it was a husband and wife who really can't stand each other and they're putting on a good show for you? Or did you sense that it doesn't mean they don't have their moments? It doesn't mean that your wife doesn't get you upset once in a while. It doesn't mean you don't get her upset every day. But obviously that's the nature of marriage. But would you say these are families they're looking to break apart? Yeah, obviously you know as well as I do that that's not the case. And the Jewish family is the Torah family is a very solid unit, and it provides the joy of life. They have a very solid unit, and the family is very together. And so on and so forth. Doesn't mean it's perfect, and it's not going to be perfect everywhere, and there are places where there are divorces, and it's not a utopia. But you yourselves have just committed in public. You just publicly said that the most important thing to you in life is health and family. Those are two most important things, and then you have either your parnassa or the Cubs or a motorcycle, whatever the third one is on the list. Now, you have to ask yourself, am I living my life right now in a way that is going to promote the things that I myself said that are the most important things to me? Or is a person living his life in a way that is really diametric opposite? Because a person may be pursuing a career for the sake of money, prestige, honor. He'll end up working too hard, won't spend enough time with his wife, won't spend enough time with his family, and so on and so forth. The person has to consider, what am I doing and why am I doing it? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? I just said this is the most important thing to me. Then you get the person with the most important thing to him who's not putting the time into the things which are most important to them. Because we are often deceived by the other goat. Family. Family gets boring after a while. There's got to be something more to it. And it does. You have to be gainfully and productively occupied. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of prestige. You don't need a lot of honor. We all need a little bit of money. We all need a little bit of stroking. We all need a little bit of sense of accomplishment. But what's the most important thing? The most important thing is my family. The most important thing is my relationship with my wife. The most important thing to me is living with that healthy unit. So what Hirsch is saying is the goat who lives in that, making that sacrifice, it's really not a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice. To the contrary, the goat who lives the life of sacrifice is the goat who's getting the most fulfillment. Because through the sacrifice, nothing comes easy. Nothing good comes easy. Of course it's going to take sacrifice. And it's going to mean behaving yourself and not chasing around. And it's going to mean behaving yourself and being devoted, not being selfish and so forth. But look at the payoff. Look at the payoff. And the people who don't live that way end up without that payoff, which they themselves want more than anything else. They're just not willing to invest in it. They're not willing to invest in it. That's what our verse is saying. So a person has to know that when you live a Torah life, it looks deceptively like sacrifice. But it's not sacrifice. I mean, it is sacrifice. Anything good is a sacrifice. But in the end, you're the one who gets that which you want in this world more than anything else. You enhance your chances most by living a Torah life. Will it work out? There are some people who don't have children, and some people end up with a lousy marriage, and some people have no partners. So will it work out? Can't tell you that it will work out because it doesn't always work out. But we don't live life based on possibilities. We live life based on probabilities. You don't invest money based on possibilities. You invest money based on probabilities. You don't go to a doctor based on possibilities. You go to a doctor based on probabilities. If a person needs surgery, they don't go to a doctor who might be able to cure them. They go to a doctor who probably will be able to cure them. Most people do not run that risk. So when it comes to life itself, why we don't run that risk either. That's what our verse is saying. Okay, that's the idea.
Who's the person who throws a goat off the cliff?
They choose a man. They choose the ish iti. There's an ish, what was called an ish iti. The Mishnah says, according to one opinion, he's the man who they see that they saw that he through Ruach HaKodesh that he's got limited time left in this world. However they knew through Ruach HaKodesh. That's called ish iti, means that it comes from et. Et means the time. His time is limited. So he's the one who pushes the goat off the cliff. They choose somebody to do it. I think there's one opinion that it was only a Kohen who did it. Only a Kohen who did it. Okay. Now, any other questions on the goats? On the goats? Okay. Yes.
Is it true they took them backwards?
Took who backwards?
The goat. And just threw it backwards.
It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. I think in the illustration it shows it that way. In one of the pictures, Mishnah, they show the goat being pushed backwards. It doesn't say in the Mishnah they push it, but it just says they push them off the cliff. There are Mishnahs for kids with pictures, which only adults use. All the good stuff is wasted on the kids. You know, they give it to the kids. My kids, when I bought my kids, I used to buy my kids games. I buy them games, but they never got to touch them if they were good. I never, I always played with them first. But they have actually illustrated Mishnayos for kids. There's actually one of the best books you could get on the laws of Shabbos is the 39 Malachos by Rabbi Baruch Chait. It's almost like cartoon. It's with the big plates of what he calls fabulous. You'll never understand Hilchos Shabbos as well as when you have that book. It's a great book, and it's almost like Waldo, like where's Waldo? Sorry, that's what it looks like. So you could have, it's really he did an excellent job. He's also got one on a Midos also, various Midos. He's got a ship, the Midos ship. It's really good. Good pictures. Like I say, they waste all the good stuff on the kids. In any event, you should go ahead.
Which cliff was it?
I just said they took them out to the wilderness to a cliff. It was a certain distance from the base of Mikdash. They walked out to the cliff. It was 12 mil. They walked out there to the cliff and they pushed off.
One every year?
That I don't know. I don't know if it had to be the same one every year. That I don't know. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. They
didn't describe like the distance that it had to fall or anything?
No. It doesn't say the distance it had to fall. It just had to be enough that he would fall and he would die. But it doesn't say very distance. But it was a cliff. Cliffs are good. Best to avoid them.
Cliffs straight down?
I mean, bad. A bus just went off a cliff in one of the South American countries, Bolivia, or one of those. They have these roads in South America. There's one road in Bolivia called Death Road. It's called Death Road. It's about a 50-kilometer road. It's a dirt road about this. It's not very wide. They take buses on it, and there's a 300. These are not top of state-of-the-art buses either, and it's a 300-meter drop from what do you call it? So just recently there was a bus went on that. It wasn't in Bolivia. It was in one of the other countries, Paraguay, I think. A bus went off a cliff also in what do you call it? So cliffs are bad. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was 26 people, but they have here it's a cliff that he falls off of. They said to avoid that run-down feeling, look both ways before crossing the street. So same thing with cliffs. In any event, the next mitzvah is 186. Next 186. And that is that it's an interesting, here you see how the connection in the Torah. The Torah says, you must not, there are certain things we're learning about in the Gemara. You're learning about Kodshim, about sacrifices and the holy, the various sacrifices that are brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says, the mitzvah is, you must not slaughter Kodshim, that means animals which have already been designated as korbanos, as offerings. You must not slaughter them outside of the Azara. The Azara is the main sanctuary in the Beis Hamikdash. You must not sacrifice animals outside of the Azara. So anytime there's a command, I think we've mentioned this in the past, if the Torah says not to do something, you always have to wonder, why would I do it that the Torah tells me not to do it? And if the Torah says not to do something, well, there must be a reason that I would do it. Otherwise, no one's going to say to you, well, do not bang your head on the wall 5 times before you leave the room. Now, there's only reason that I might have told you that is, well, why would I even say that? I don't suspect you unless you happen to know that there is a $500,000 reward for anybody who's willing to bang his head on the wall 5 times before he leaves the room. And I say to you, don't do it, because I want to get the money. Right? So I say to you, don't do it. So the Torah comes along, and the Torah says, do not sacrifice animals that are designated as kodshim. Don't sacrifice them outside of the sanctuary. Now, why might I do it, and what's the connection to Yom Kippur? So the basic idea is that having a designated place shows importance. When you have if you run into somebody and you have a conversation with them, somebody says, oh, hi, I had to ask you. I know the question's not important. If somebody sees me at a wedding and says, oh, I wanted to ask you something, I know it's not that important. Because if it was important, they would have made a point of contacting me. And if you have an important meeting, so I'll meet you tomorrow at the place, at the restaurant, at the office. We have a meeting place. A shul, nowadays, is a designated place. That gives the shul certain importance. In the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to bring an offering, have a designated place for the offering. A designated place shows that there's certain importance. That's idea number 1. Idea number 2, why does this mitzvah follow right after the goats? Why do you think this mitzvah follows right after the goats? A very interesting idea, and it's a very interesting connection. Well, if it's a good idea, I think, Daniel, you were asking yesterday, if it's a good idea, if you take the goats and you bring the goat out and you push it off the cliff, so you may get a Jew who says, hey, somehow bringing offerings out in the wilderness is a good idea. And then another Jew may take an animal and say, well, if one is good, more is better. And therefore he may take the goat, he may take an animal that is designated as sacrifice, and he'll go and actually sacrifice it out in the wilderness. And what is the result of sacrificing out? There's a potential, besides doing it outside the designated area. What's that? Close, satanic, some sort of satanic worship. Because people who wanted to contact the satanic forces, whatever they are, you go out to the wilderness, there's a blood ritual of some sort, and then in that blood ritual, then you can make contact with the occult. And interestingly enough, when people made contact with the occult, you know how these forces appeared to them? They appeared like goats. The forces of the occult, when people contacted, they're called the Seirim, the goats, which is very reminiscent of who? Who's compared to the Seir? Esav was hairy. Seish Seir, where did he live? Esav? In Har Seir, Mount Seir. And the goats are called Seirim. And the various forces of impurity would appear to people as goats. I had a guy here once in the yeshiva that told me he was messing around with a Ouija board. Something or other that he was messing around with, and he was really getting into it. And he said that he stopped because before he ever came from, he stopped because one day he was walking. I don't know if it was just Ouija board. He was starting to get into some whatever it was. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but he was getting into investigating this sort of stuff. And he said one day he was walking on the sidewalk and he saw goats coming at him, images of goats coming at him. He said it freaked him out. And so he stopped his practices and became frum instead. And then he saw rabbis coming at him. At that point, he decided, I better go back to the goats. So I was enchanted because when he told me that, he did not know anything about Judaism at the time. In their sources, the Ramban says that's how they appear to those who engage in that sort of what's it called, a cult or satanic worship, whatever it's called, and therefore it was to avoid getting involved in that. You see, remember we learned, I don't know if we learned in the Gemara, there's something called shadim. Have you ever heard of shadim? Shadim are it is a pathetic translation because there is no translation. We translate as demons. Shadim are a level of existence somewhere between, the Gemara says, between angels and man. They have certain characteristics like angels. They have wings. They know the future. They could go anywhere. They have certain characteristics like man. They're an intermediate stage between men and angels. And there's not a physical they're not physically tangible, but the Gemara does say they reproduce like human beings. So it's a kind of creepy thing. So I was once, when I was in youth group, we were at camp. And the Gemara talks about them leaving footprints, and you could see their ways to contact them. So we were once at camp, in Bnei Akiva camp, and I went to the more religious day school in Chicago, and my friends were at the kind of more modern day school. So what's that? They were at Hill Torah, and I was at Tiferes Tzvi, and I wasn't that religious, but that's where my parents sent me. And then at camp, I was about 15, 16 years old. A friend of mine wore, it's pitch black at night. We're walking back to our tents, and he says to me, Cap, do you know anything about shadim? In the pitch dark at night. And I didn't know. I said, well, not much, but why? He says, because I saw footprints over there that looked like they either shadim or a bobcat. So either way, it wasn't good. So I assumed it was a bobcat and headed bad for a tent as fast as I could. But there's a concept of shadim. Now, people who want to contact them go through a blood ritual. Blood is always used in this, and they are always existing, the Gemara says, out in desolate, soiled areas. The Gemara talks about people who go out to outhouses. That's where they hang around in dirty, soiled, desolate areas. They don't hang around where the regular population is. That's where they gravitate to. And therefore, a person who takes a sacrifice and he leaves the Beis Hamikdash and he goes out into the wilderness, he might be up to hanky-panky. Because if he wants to make contact with that sort of thing, that's where he's going to go. Therefore, the Torah says, keep it in the Beis Hamikdash. So you don't go out there and you don't. That's one of the reasons. Remember we spoke about the mitzvah of covering the blood? You cover the blood. There's a mitzvah of covering. When you shecht an animal, you have to cover the blood. Now that applies to fowl, and it applies to non-domesticated kosher animals like venison, that sort of thing. It does not apply to cows, sheep, or goats, which are what's called behemoths. It only applies to a chaya, which is a wild, undomesticated animal. So the commentaries point out, why is that? Why the bird blood, when you shech the bird, you have to cover the blood. There's a mitzvah called kisui yadayim. You take dirt and you cover the blood. If you shech the behemoth, you cover the blood. I'm sorry, if you shech the chaya, an undomesticated, you cover the blood. If you shech the behemoth, a cow, which is the thing most commonly shechted, a cow or a goat or a sheep, there you don't have to cover the blood. Why not? So you know what the Ramban says? Because where are you likely to find fowl and where are you likely to find undomesticated animals? Out in the wilderness. And once you're out in the wilderness, if you shech them, because you want to have a roast, you shech them, there's blood. Being out in the wilderness with blood accessible, you may fall into the temptation of now starting to make contact with all sorts of things that you shouldn't. Therefore, the Torah says, cover it up as fast as you can with dirt. There's a mitzvah, cover up the blood with dirt. When you shecht it, that will remove the temptation. Whereas a cow is usually shechted in your backyard, in your barn, or a goat or a sheep. That's a domesticated animal, so there's no concern that you're going to use the blood to make that sort of contact. Therefore, that's what the Ramban, I think it's the Ramban, if I'm not mistaken. That's what the Ramban says. The forces, let's call it the demonic forces, the satanic forces, the occult. Whatever word you guys use from your life of television, whatever it is that they used to call it in all those shows. Right? There are no. I think in Harry Potter you had to drink unicorn blood. And wasn't it something about drinking unicorn blood? Well, it makes you immortal. Unicorn blood makes you immortal. Right? You have to keep drinking it. Uh-huh. Well, all right. In any event, that's it. So we'll continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Show. I just want to ask you, did you guys hear? That's the next mitzvah. Oh, okay, there we go. The next one is covering the blood. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, and then we'll get into the area that we actually read on Yom Kippur, the Torah reading for Yom Kippur. We'll talk about that tomorrow.